Okay, hello. Hopefully you are not so tired. It's 10 minutes or minutes more from we count the next speakers. So I'm going to talk basically about the squatting. I'm not a representative of the squatting movement in Madrid or in Spain, but I was an activist in many social centers, squat social centers, for more than 1 decade. And I'm also a sociologist, so I try to combine these two activities, political and academic activities. I'm also a member of a collective which is called SQUEC, the Squatting Europe Collective, basically formed by people in the university, but many of us are also activists. Some of them were activists in the past. So today I would like to just talk a little bit about a curious event that happened in the last 2 years in Madrid in particular, is the city where I live, regarding the convergence of squatters with people engaged in this platform of people affected by mortgages, and also in particular with the M15 movement, which started in the 15th of May 2011. But first of all, I would like to make a short introduction. I'm going just to read a few ideas about the squatting, because I always believe that there are many prejudices about the squatting, some things which are very contradictory, and there are also limitations. So probably most of you are familiar with squats, but there is an internal complexity within squatting, which I believe it deserves a little of reflection. So after the introduction, I will talk about this convergence that started in the occupation of the square in Sol, in Madrid, with the other movements. So squatting tends to remain a radical gesture, a movement in the margins, a temporary solution to housing needs, a face-to-face challenge to private property and to the unjust distribution of spatial resources, and also an experiment of collective autonomy. It is verified that the squatting, at least in Europe, may last for long periods of time under different economic stages, crisis or boom, and regardless, different legal regulations, tolerance, either tolerance or repression. Although, of course, squatting is subject to the influence of external factors, so it may vary in volume and political strength. The main contribution of squatting and other autonomous urban movements is to provide practical experiences and radical approaches to wider anti-capitalist movements and initiatives, in case they explode at any moment. Squatting is a limited political experience in case it remains isolated from other social struggles, from the dwellers of the areas where squats are located, from the recognition of the society at large, and from any local and or transnational networks of squats. Squatting may differ either in terms of housing purposes or in the promotion of social centers. It may involve different social groups, alliances, places, and tactics. However, both types of squatting may be mutually connected and help each other. The threat of an immediate or future eviction of squat buildings makes them temporary experiences of living apart or against the dominant system, in a similar flexible organization of social time under post-Fordist and neoliberal capitalism. Squatting is a viable alternative form of tenancy, different from ownership, renting, or authorized permission to use, since it entails a collective way of possession, self-managed use of a building or a piece of land. Long duration, expansion of initiatives, and useful contributions to residents and activists are crucial to the legitimation of squatting, but this is not enough to persist. Resistance to all kinds of attacks and agreed, convenient, and creative ways of institutionalization may help to spread this residential alternative. Lessons learned from the M15 movement onwards were these that follows. For example, coalitions and convergence with other social movements, real openness to a wide diversity of people, organized structures for providing potential squatters with technical and legal skills, different and mutually respect social centers, either squat or not, working together. All of this happened in the last 2 years in Madrid, and it was completely new, apart from the 2 previous decades of continuous squatting, some periods almost without squatting in a big city as Madrid is. So as you can see in this scheme, squatting as a collective spatial appropriation is something that can interrupt, can produce a short circuit in the expansion of debt as an expansion itself of exploitation. It also can claim for rights and can satisfy the needs that these rights are begun to. And this is a way to reconnect labor rights and basic social needs, even when they may vary according to different social definitions. Squatting is not just an end, a collective appropriation of the space, but it is also a means for living alternative to capitalism in terms of taking over autonomously material resources and redistribute them, gaining access to a place in the city, to be close to peers, to enjoy services and facilities which are spatially concentrated and unevenly located. And also, it's also an alternative in terms of having time to live with autonomy from market and state dependencies, to share and to cooperate, to participate politically, and to build and use public goods and spaces. I always like to show this very complex scheme, but the important thing to this is that, as you can see, the line in the middle, which can separate housing or squatting for housing and squat social centers. And one of my arguments, according to all the experiences I've had in Spain, is that at least in Spain, squat social centers were at the core of the squatting movement, but they were not completely disconnected to different kinds of squatting for housing proposals. So that's the reason, because squat social centers were more connected to different movements, even to non-squat social centers, and they could promote a strategic view and a wider perspective about this kind of struggles. Today I also wrote this scheme because a debate we had a couple of weeks ago in Madrid between different social centers, which are now meeting after the M15 movement. There was a new coordination of many different social centers. So in one of these debates, one of the questions was, why are you, to whom are you being useful in society? And some of the activists always feel that they are only satisfying their own needs, and this is completely false. They are really building a social network as this one that you can see here. There is, of course, a hardcore of activists who used to meet regularly in the assembly. There is also, of course, all those figures are completely estimates, and it's like just an example. There is also a group of people who are floating members of the assembly. There are also occasional activists, people who participate in the self-management of the squad. There are also a background network, social network of support, which is conformed by participants in activities and visitors, and of course by sympathizers. And in some cases, in some particular moments of history, these sympathizers can reach millions, maybe. So, and there is also this connection with other social movements, organizations, struggles. Some of them are even in the core of the movement, and some of them are in the periphery. But that's the reason, because I always argue that a squat, a social center, or a squat house is always something else than a place. So the strength of squatting lies on the evidence that it is more than a place. It is a political engine that calls people to meet, cooperate, and self-organize. It promotes and creates a social network of political ties by including different types of people involved and a diversity of social groups who can make use of the space. And it gives birth to an anomalous place, a public and autonomous institution, a porous and open social space, a common sense of place, a spatial singularity which is permanently under construction. So my intention was to explain now how this convergence was possible in the case of Spain, since it was completely not frequent and completely singular. So in the regions when the occupation of the main square, the most central square in Madrid, start, then this movement, the M15 movement, was divided into popular assemblies, working groups, and different initiatives, demonstrations, mobilizations, which we can call the M15 movement at large. So in this first month of the occupation of the square, start the convergence with squatters, as you can see above in this graph. Start because many of the squatters join the occupation and contribute to the self-organization of the occupation of the square. And also people who were being evicted because of the mortgages, suffering foreclosures, also approached the occupation of the square. So that was the starting point of this movement. This was the situation of the social centers. Some of them were occupied, some of them were not occupied, some were only pieces of land, and there were also public squat houses. Not all the squat houses are public or visible. Most of them are completely still hidden. So, and this is the situation. These are all the squats that came about after the M15 movement. So it's almost the double. This happened in the periphery. This is the situation before the M15 movement, and these are all the new initiatives that happened after this movement. And in this graph, I just try to explain the convergence with the PA, with the platform of people affected by mortgages, but I think I have no time to explain all of these details. But one of my main arguments is that in the beginning, around 6 months after the M15, there was a huge wave of new squats which took advantage of the great legitimation that the struggles against evictions promoted by the PAM had at that moment. But in a second period, in the last year, in 2012, the situation was actually the opposite. That means that people involved in the M15 movement and people involved in the new squats were some of the biggest promoters, in the case of Madrid, along some other collectives and organizations, of the struggle against evictions of poor people and middle-class people who could not pay mortgages. So it was a curious way of crossing paths between these three movements, which were completely different, and apart from the M15, the other two exist before the M15. So, conclusions. Sol Camp provided a hybrid and self-managed experience that gave birth to many decentralized groups and assemblies. The M15 identity was shaped there. The M15 movement and the squatting movement helped each other due to this original collaboration in the camp, their similar horizontal and self-managed forms of organization, and increasing favorable public opinion related to housing issues. A shift occurred when members of popular assemblies start to squat new social centers, what was completely new in our political tradition in Madrid. So the novelties were the popularity of the squatting office and the handbook, which was published at that moment, a new, very positive media coverage, the M15-like discourses and new coordination and mutual aid between different squat and not squat social centers. In a second stage, the anti-foreclosures campaign gained legitimacy and effective capacity due to the increasing involvement of local assemblies and working groups of the M15 movement, squatters also included. So, direct actions of civil disobedience, close connections to popular local assemblies, access to state institutions, which were completely apart from the experience of the squatters before. And dramatic events, evictions, suicides, repression, etc., contributed to increase the social and political impact of the pro-housing movement in alliance with the M15 movement. So there was also a hybrid coalition between a formal organization and the M15 working groups. So I think this is all. Thank you.